and we have a really diverse panel of folks that are going to share their different experiences with raising goats in Kentucky. We're going to get our slides lined up, and our speakers are all going to introduce themselves. So, Vaughn, it's you now. Thank you for being here.
Dang, I thought I was going to get more claps than that. Now that's like it. Let's see. One of these are the clicker. That? Does this clicker not work? Gotcha. Okay. Well, darn, I wish I had my clicker. Walk around with this jumbo clicker, you all, so don't. It's the keyboard. I'm so used to having a clicker. I could click, point, click. Anyway, what's up, everybody? We're going to talk about raising goats in Kentucky. I know, look at me, I'm a goat farmer. Does that even look like, you know what I mean? This picture right here is 3 of my goats in my backyard after this past crazy winter. Well, winter's not over, but this past like cold front. It's just a picture that I took to start these slides off, and yeah, let's get it started. My name is Vaughn. Little story about how my farm got started. I'm in my backyard. I'm also in Louisville. Is anybody else in here in Louisville? Hands for Louisville? Cool, we got one table and then a person, and are you in Louisville? You're just scratching? All right, cool. She moved, so I looked, so. I'm in Louisville, so it's not that I have acreage. For all you people that aren't in Louisville, how many acres? 52, 80, 98. Anybody else with acreage? 20. I got 2,000 square feet. So my 2,000 square feet in my backyard is where I have my animals, and as you see in the bold print, my path is not the right path. Do not follow any of the things that I've done. Learn from them. It's something to learn from, but definitely don't follow my path. There's been a lot of heartbreak. There's been a lot of communicating with people. If you don't like communicating with people, it ain't gonna work for you, because on 2,000 square feet, if a goat is in heat, your neighbor knows that either you killing a kid or somebody screaming next door, but really it's your goats making their mating call. So, I mean, there's things to think about with my path and what I've done. But I've started out with chickens. As you can see over here, this space is where it started. And if I had a clicker, I'd laser beam that. That's where it started. It turned into that, and even right here, look at this. Look how close my neighbors are. You can like see them all. And again, for my people with acreage, that's something that you don't really have to experience the way that I experience with my farm and what I do. I started off with chickens. I did grow vegetables. I was loving to hatch my eggs, and I did all of these things like most urbanites whenever they have farms. You start off with chickens. They're like the gateway drug into animals and all the other things that you do, but you start with your chickens. I had tons of eggs. My roosters would do this type of thing, and they would run in the street, and people would stop, and they, oh my God, you have chickens over here, and they take pictures as if it was a bad thing to have. Because, I mean, think about it. How many of us eat food? So all of us that eat food or consume some sort of meat, you have to have some animal somewhere. Well, mine were chickens. I started there. And in the space during this time, I decided one day I wanted to do dairy as well. This clicker, if you can do it right, man, it's nice. So I started off with the question, where do I find goats? That screenshot right there was taken on 2000, well, the screenshot was from next door, but that was posted on my Instagram, 2020, so I haven't been owning goats forever. And I asked the question, where do you get goats? can you get them from Craigslist? Like, do you find them online? I don't know. I didn't know. And the lady that responded to me, her name is Sheila Sanders. Shout out to Sheila. She said, you know, obviously we can see it there, but I wouldn't go to Craigslist. I'd find somebody that had goats, reputable breeders, ask them, get acquainted, learn about their process and what they're doing, and then walk your way into it. I didn't know anybody that had goats, so I had to go to Craigslist. And I found out the hard way. What was important to me was size, because, you know, 2,000 square feet, you can't run around with Kikos. You don't want to run around with Nubians. You got to go with something small, so I had Nigerian dwarves and pygmies. That was just my route, period. If I had 80, 90, 20, 50 acres, I'd probably do a larger animal and have a little bit more fun with it, get into production, and do those sorts of things. But I had to think about my size first, the accommodations, waste management, things of that sort, before I decided to do my goats. So again, space was important to me, and then breed, and then purpose. I wanted dairy, but I also wanted meat. And if anybody in here, does anybody know Kenya Abraham in here? You guys familiar with Kenya? She was the person that was mentioned during lunch. If you're trying to convert to organic, reach her. She's with Oak. She has this really cool farm in Lexington where she does almost like a dairy co-op. And I loved the idea, and I was like, well, what if I did something like that with pygmies here? People got their goat milk, and instead of cow's milk, it was goat milk. And instead of it being a large farm, it was a backyard farm. You know, it was a great idea. I run with it. And then mind you, at that time, I didn't even know Kenya, but I knew that that was the idea that I was going with. And then hardiness, that's another area of things to think about when you're picking your animals on what you want to do with your goats. I learned that from Fatima in an interview. So I went with pygmy. And as you've seen from the first picture, started there, turned to that, goats don't do really well in areas with vegetation. For some reason, they decide that all food is their food. All green belongs to them. No matter what you put up, no matter what you decide to have to cover it, the green belongs to them. I mean, look at this one. And remember, this is when I started. This right here is an Alpine, that's a Nigerian, and that's a Nubian. I had 3 random goats. That didn't last too long. I went from having the 3 random goats to the picture that you see next to it. In relation to that first picture, that fence is this fence. That's the side of my garage, and that's Birdie. Birdie didn't like the other male goat that was in the backyard. So Birdie would find ways to get away from the other male goat whenever that goat decided to chase him. And that was something I had to deal with in my space. Again, if you have 50, 20, 80, 90 with somewhere, you don't have that problem. That's a problem that I have to deal with in my space and the type of constraints that I have to deal with. And then keeping them all together, and then how to manage your herd and when do you band, those all come up later in the process. But again, it started with the dairy idea, and then things got blurry, and I said, you know what, maybe I could pivot out of that and then start doing something like making goats normal for people in the city. By a show of hands for my Louisville people, has anybody seen me in Louisville, a school, a workshop outside of course, I got people, people are here. So I decided that at that point in time that I would start to pivot into workshops. Workshops, presentations, educational platforms, and places where I could bring the goats to show people what it's like to own your own livestock and manage your own livestock in your space. That trio right there with diapers on. Funny, I know. This is goat yoga. You can see the feet of somebody back there, but I focus on my goats whenever I'm going somewhere. I started to do goat yoga and bring the goats to places to have those type of experiences for people in the city, because again, that's not something that people in the city often get the chance to see and do. Some of my farming methods. I believe in upcycling. I believe in reuse. I believe in repurpose. I do not think that because of so much materials that we have out, especially in the city, that goes to waste or gets dumped out or gets thrown out or put somewhere, that we couldn't reuse it in a way to make it work for us. So what you see right here between all of these different wood sections and panels are privacy fences that have been reclaimed, restructured, repurposed, put back into my backyard and shaped for pens, structures. They have like little buildings that they go into and hide in whenever it's raining. I mean, like the whole 9 yards. If it wasn't like as wet as it is right now, I mean, it's the Taj Mahal for goats in the city, swear to God. Like, they love it. And this funny little T shape, 2x4 T, that's my lock. That's how I kind of lock my backyard. If you could see right here, I'm using my pointer to show the slats in the fence. I would cut these boards in half and cover my slats so passerbyers don't just like browse and try to figure out what's screaming in my backyard. I know it looked like a lot of work, but it happened over time, and I kind of built it that way. But reuse, repurpose. All right. So how did the goats make it into the city? We started the mobile petting zoo in private events and then also, like I said, education. So that's mainly what I use my animals to do. That's what we bring them out to talk to kids. This is actually at Bellarmine University. Brought one there, and as you can see at the edge of the picture, somebody's taking a picture of the goat. But I normally just do workshops, and they learn about what the goats like to eat, what they like to do. My Central High School students, they get to do the injections and things of the sort. So anytime I have babies, when the kids happen, which is gonna happen between now and probably February 16th. I don't know the exact date. I'm not a veterinary. That's vet tech class. That's what they're supposed to figure out. But the babies will happen then. When the babies happen, I bring them to the school, and then my vet tech kids, they do all the shots. So this is the herd from the summertime. Some of these goats obviously are gone. They've either been sold or freezered. Sold or freezered. That's a good word. And this is just a picture of them goatscaping. During goatscaping, a service that I offer, they go into a backyard and they have free range to do whatever they want. 40, 80, 20, 90. You guys have the space to do that. I bring the 40 to 80 to 90 to them in what we in the city called yard waste. So when people are cutting down branches, when they're bagging up leaves, when they're doing their pruning, that is like our time to shine. We collect all of that stuff when we bring it to the goats, and based on the relationship I have with the people that are doing the pruning, the raking, and the removal, because I need to know what type of plants they have, what they do with their plants, are they using pesticides? I care about all that crap. If they don't do any of that, then it's perfect for me to say, all right, cool, I'll bring the goats over, or I'll just haul that stuff away. And they say, oh man, I'll pay you to haul it. And I'm like, what? You don't have to pay me, man, this is cool. And they, no, thank you. Well, shoot, I just got money to feed my goats. This is awesome, thank you. And other stuff, kidding around. Questions that most people will ask is, how long is the baby cycle. Gestation period, 143 days to 157. So give or take a week, 2 weeks, and you'll have kids. And yes, I do take pictures of all of this stuff whenever it's happening. One of those things that I just learned in the process that your goats have to make a certain baby weight. If not, you're in trouble. You have a 45-minute window for them to be standing, walking around, mobile, doing all the things, or again, you're in trouble. Shots, I normally do my shots myself, or now that I have Central High School students, and they can get these hours, they do the shots. And in 8 to 10 weeks, I got a group of baby boys. They're the boy band. I'm glad you got it. So some people don't know. In order to manage the herd, the little boys get rubber bands, and yeah, that's a part of the process of goat castration. So yeah, they get rubber bands, and their little man parts fall off, and then they're happy, but they're not happy. All right, sorry. Back on track. Feeding and watering. How do I do feeding and watering? Perfect. You guys know what cattle panels look like. I have mounted a cattle panel to my fence and a roofing piece, sheet metal, over that cattle panel. They kind of collapse on each other. I lift the roof, pull down the cattle panel, drop the bale of hay in there, and the goats eat out of it. Where do I get my hay from? I don't know if Keith McKenzie's here today, but holler at Keith. Keith brings me hay, and he's the organic farmer in Breckenridge County. So I get my hay from his organic farm. And then there's Christmas trees, there's pumpkins. If I'm doing the feeder on the fence, that's sweet feed and corn. And then I take those 55-gallon drums, I cut them in half, and they attach to the bottom of the spout on the roof where I get water. So I kind of don't pay for water. God blesses me with some of that stuff. But then there's times when I get too much of a blessing, like right now. So I'm working past that blessing. Thank you, Jesus, but chill. Let me recoup. And yeah. Cost and benefits. Oh, there goes Keith over there. So that's a picture of Keith, myself, when he's bringing hay. And those are some of the adults now, but babies then. Back then when I had the little pony in the back for them to jump on and prance around with. And then I also did partnerships. So anybody familiar with Bachfest? Hands for Bachfest. Does anybody know what Bachfest is? Go Bachfest. So Bachfest happens around April, and Bachfest for Germans, goats, so it's like Goat Fest, Bachfest, it's a beer thing. I partnered with a brewery, had some of my goats featured on a can. They also were in a commercial when they were babies, and voila, we had a partnership for Kentuckiana Backyard Farms and Atrium Brewery to put out a Hellesbach, which is a cream, dark brown type of beer. And then the word that we used was quaffable. It's really quaffable beer. But we put out a beer together as a partnership because I also get spent grain from the breweries to help supplement the feed for the goats. It's kind of our trade-off. So takeaways. That's my little guy up at the top. Another one of those goat yoga pictures. Figure out your purpose. Be prepared to pivot. That's if you're in the city doing some city stuff. But if not, I don't know what you would do with, gosh, I can't tell you what I would do with 20 acres or more. But be prepared to pivot if the plan that you start off with doesn't work. Have your space ready for your herd, which obviously you guys have to deal with fencing at some point. Prevention is a way better than the alternatives. And what is prevention? Prevention of any kind of diseases, any type of bacterias, any type of nonsense like that, because of the ones that have made it, there have been some that have not made it, and that's due to either weight management or waste management, and waste management is a huge thing, but again, on 2,000 acres, you'll be fine. 2,000 square feet, not so much. You have to figure out a way to get the poop and the hay out of there so they don't, like, disease themselves up. Goats are herd animals. You gotta at least have 2 if you decide to do this, or again, manage a herd. You don't wanna have like 1. And then have a vet on call for your big problems, because you need to handle the small stuff. If I didn't have an Emily to ask questions to, I probably would have had way more fatalities. All right, so here's the mamas. Earlier, you seen Banshee. She does live up to her name. She is a really loud one. Dang, there is supposed to be an outline around each one of these words so you could read them. That's Belle. Belle was the one that was giving birth in the other picture. That's Bernice, her daughter, and Baby, her other daughter. Brown cow's up at the top. Bella is my first. Bailey was my second. Bailey made Bree. Bree made a logo. And here are the dads. Go figure. That's Boy, and that's his kid. So, like, not too far apart. And as far as looks, Birdie's mom is Bailey. That's his mom over here in the corner. And when he was a baby, I'm gonna try to do this really fast. Yeah, that's him all the way at the corner right there. Birdie when he was tiny, tiny, tiny. But Birdie takes after his mom, really cool personality, really calm goat. I think that's also one of those things where, like, if you're around your animal a lot, you know their mannerisms. If you are not, they tend to just be whatever. I'm around mine enough to know I want him. Oh, and this little icon right here, yeah, they made it to the freezer box. So, yeah, those dads are in the freezer box. Birdie, he's still alive and kicking. That picture was taken recently. At the time when Birdie was a baby, Boy basically controlled the herd. So as you could see with all of them in the background, Boy was the father of all of the herd. And at that time, Billy was not really happy with Boy being there. That chunk taken out of his horns was from a backyard battle. And I learned at that point in time that both the boys can't stay together too often. Not whenever. Can I answer? You know how funny that would be if I was, hello? They'd be like, is this Jim? No. Anyway, but yeah, so the boys can't stay together not too often because of their testosterone issues and the fact that they want to clash all the time. So that happened to his horns, and then at that point in time when he was actually smaller, Boy got removed. And then he did that to Birdie. So then he got removed. But Birdie right now does not have that problem because I started a boy band. And the boy band, you know, they just sing backup. They don't really try to take charge. Now, the babies. As you guys can see at the top, and again, I did put there's supposed to be a white stroke around all this so you could read that. But that top picture is from Miss Emily's class. Miss Emily's class, that's sitting at the table. That was from last year. And those were the 9 that were born last year. The green checks are the ones that are keepers. and the rest of them have either moved on or expired. And keeping on or keeping them is because they had this type of mannerism. They could be at goat yoga, they could be around other people, their behavior was well, they didn't run crazy, they don't scream too much. I mean, like, all of the nice genetics and traits that I need for the city. You probably won't have that problem with 80, 90, 50, 20 acres, so probably nothing to worry about. But for me and my circumstance, I have to worry about those things and think about that. No matter how cute they were, that don't matter. If you can't follow protocol in the backyard, you're gone. And that's kind of what happens. So this year, we'll see what turns out. Out of the 3 ladies that were born last year, Blanca, Beauty, and Blizzard, I kept 2 of the 3. Out of the other 6 boys, Bojack, kept him. Rest of them, gone. And if you have an Instagram, if you got a Facebook, keep in touch. Time-wise, am I good on time? Am I rolling? I planned this. Keep in touch. Email's there, Facebook's there, website not so much. I do a link tree because link tree leads to everything else. I am a former TEDx speaker, so speaking on stage and doing presentations is my kick. And for the people that are old enough in Louisville or Lexington, I run an event called Nerd Night. I am always looking for presenters. Somebody come and present about the thing that they want to present about. And yeah, we'll move on to Action Jackson Farm.
Oh, okay. Which one? Is it this one?
Yeah.
This one? Okay. I'm not sure I can beat that. I'm Fatima Jackson from South Vicor, Kentucky, Mercer County. I'm excited to be here with diverse set of speakers and audience. So thank you to Oak for having us here today. We raise meat goats with my husband, Justin, and 2 young kids. South Vicor is in Mercer County. It's, I think, 2 counties south of Frankfort. We've been raising goats for 8 years. We got the property in 2012, but it took us 4 years to get things ready, with fencing and, planning and all that. Of course, we don't have unlimited funds, so we had to figure out what was priority, and that's kind of how we got started. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the breed that we raise, and I'm not promoting this breed because when people try to ask what's the best breed of meat goats to raise, it really depends on your goal. And hopefully I can touch into the reasoning behind this breed a little bit more. But for example, like Vaughn, I like what he said about the temperament. If you're gonna have goats doing yoga, you don't want a crazy goat, doing goat yoga. And so that's kind of in line with that. We also, temperament is a big deal for us because we're busy. We have 2 young kids running around. I don't want crazy goats. I don't want to have to deal with crazy goats. And because of that, I'll tell you a story. When we first started, we wanted to go into Kikos because of their hardiness. And I still like the Kiko breed. However, their temperament, not so much. I had a buck one time that jumped a fence, like he cleared it. I was shocked, like a deer, to get to does. And since then, I was like, nope, you're going to the stockyards. And we decided to go with this breed. And two things, mainly their temperament and their muscling. They don't have a lot of fast growth like the boer goats and some of the dairy influenced goats. However, they do have, they dress well. And so that's one of the reasons why we went with this breed. And with this breed, they're also called fainting goats, because I know a lot of people are familiar with the fainting goats. However, they've been bred so small and used mainly for pets. And so to get into the meat goat production side of it, you really have to find breeders that are breeding for size, bigger frame, and also for commercial meat production. So at the top picture over there are some of our does. We have a lot of heels, so perfect for goats. Not so much for mowing, but good thing we have goats to take care of that. And at the bottom left is one of the full myotonic buck that we own. We don't own him right now, but because he's been shaving, that way it kind of shows the muscling. And on the bottom right is a cross of what a cross looks like. And that's actually a Kiko. And I don't know if you know how Kikos normally look like. They're really not very meaty, but that's what a cross produced for market. We also sell goat meat. And customers, those that consume goat meat, are very diverse in how they want to consume their goat meats, how their cuts look like. It's not like the traditional lamb cuts, the traditional retail cuts that the loin, the roast. Most ethnic consumers, which is including myself, because I'm an ethnic consumer as well, prefer a little bit flavor in our food. And so when you talk about bone-in, that's where you get most of the flavor. And so we got a processor in Liberty that's very patient with me and kind of works with me to do exactly what the customers want. And of course, I'm not able to meet all the customers' needs because there's also halal and other diverse needs in the ethnic community. So I try to meet as much as I can. So we also sell kids to the livestock market. And right now we are at about 100 does, adult does. And what we do is we usually try to call and cut back. That way we try to limit the number of goats we have for now and also improve the genetics to make sure that we're not keeping everyone. So we do a lot of practices, and I'm just gonna generalize and try to touch on a little bit. One of the things we utilize a lot is rotational grazing, because feeding grain to 100 goats is no joke. So we try to, rotate them as much as possible. And we try to raise them as natural as possible to prevent having to deworm, fool with them, feed, and all that. And so the bottom picture is a little Sericea lespedeza patch in one of our pastures, and that's where we put them in the heat of the summer. That way, it can help put that warm population down. So we mainly try to raise them on pasture. When I say pasture, I mean pasture, almost everything. They do have shelters, and if I do have some that are, kidding, depending on weather, we plan for that, but they're mainly pastured goats. So, kidding. So, as I mentioned earlier, we mainly try to do everything on pasture. And the these pictures are actually from, I think, late December, early January. We're lucky that the crazy weather hasn't come yet, and so you see some of the does. I just go check on them, make sure baby's nursing, tag them, and leave them to it. The one on the top left, she's an overachiever. She's always having triplets all the time. She doesn't like to kid in the pasture. She likes to go in the shelter to have her babies, which is smart, I think, but she's an overachiever. And the bottom left picture shows, the mamas and the babies on pasture, and we kind of the shelter there, and we try to put straw in their shelters, to kind of keep them from having to be in the mud all the time. Winter. So there's a lot of challenges with goats in the winter, one of which is water. And again, we try to be as sustainable as possible. So if you see this tire tank, is one that my Justin, my husband, built, and it's actually pulling water from a pond. And he has some kind of overflow system. And I think this day was one of the cold days we had recently. It was like 2-3 degrees, I can't remember, but the water is they're still able to drink from it, which is a blessing. And then I have these feeders that we got recently. That way we didn't have to fight them every time. And so, for our well-being and also their well-being, it's really been a blessing to have that feeders. And it's portable. We usually move it around whatever pasture they're in to feed them. And then you have the babies and their favorite buddy, her name is Honey, our Great Pyrenees Anatolian cross that protects them from being eaten by the coyotes. And then I have helpers, or we have helpers. So that's our daughter Giovanna, and she loves to do the goat stuff, and that's James. He usually likes to hang out with his dad. He said doing manly stuff. I don't know if the other stuff is not manly enough for him. I don't know, but that's mainly our operation. I know I brushed through this really fast, so if, towards the end, if anyone has specific questions, we'll be happy to answer.
Keep in touch with Action Jackson Farm. 859-325-8476.
And if you don't get all that, these will be recorded too, and you'll be able to have access to them later. So, okay, so I'm Holly. I'm from Hollow Springs Farm. We're in Rockcastle County, which is right on the edge of the mountains of eastern Kentucky. And this picture right here is at the top. Well, it's not quite at the top of our farm. There's another bench that goes up. So like our farm is basically shaped like a giant bowl, which it makes it really hard to do a lot of traditional farming practices. So down at the very bottom is where our house is, and that's our dog, Sunny. She's our work dog. She keeps most of the coyotes and stuff run off from our herd, and she is not trained because I don't know how to train dogs, let alone anything else. But she will help take the goats back and forth if I need them, because she's an Australian Shepherd, so she just does it automatically. And so the same thing that Vaughn and Fatima said, breeding your goats for, safety around your family, breeding your goats to be a little bit more compliant as far as staying behind a fence is super important. That's my granddaughter, and she likes to come and help sometimes, and she just goes right in with the goats, and they're all very friendly, and I don't worry, so much about, her getting hurt. So that's really important when you're looking for goat breeds, when you're looking for good genetics within your herd. Having goats that are calm is an excellent benefit. Now, the reason why we first got into goats, our youngest, we have 5 children, our youngest had really bad stomach problems. He's now an adult. We got goats when he was young to try to remedy those problems because nothing conventional was working. So I started milking right away. So the very first goat we got was a milk goat. She was an Alpine. And so we started to, branch out a little bit and mix in herds, which I'll talk about in a second here. So one of the things that we use our goats for now mostly is land management. Goats don't eat everything. People think that they eat everything. They taste test everything. So they'll go through and they'll chew up stuff. And you can see this is a lot of our farm. It used to be, it's been a family farm for a long time. Our house is like over 100 years old. So people have grown tobacco on that farm. There's been cattle on that farm. That farm has been used for hay. And for about 40 years before we acquired it, it was used as like a farming side hustle, basically. So the land was getting robbed over and over and over again through, bad timber practices and just, not giving back to the land, basically. So our woods, which is about 70 some acres of our property, it looks like this. So it's not good woods because it's been overlogged, and so lots of little brushy stuff growing up in between. We do have cattle on the property as well, which we rotate out with the goats, which has been really nice because their parasite load is different. So you can put in goats behind your cattle and they're not going to get the same parasites and vice versa. We did try to pasture pigs on the place too, but if you've ever kept pastured pigs, they can literally move boulders the size of your car. so they are like big tillers. They destroy everything. Goats are on the opposite end of that, and that's what's such a beautiful thing about them as a pasture animal. Their hooves are tiny, so they do not compact the ground at all. They eat everything that a farmer just doesn't want on their farm. This picture right here, before I put those goats in that pasture, it was completely green. You could not see through it at all. If you stood on one side of it, you couldn't see the other side of that big chunk. They went through it. They will literally eat small trees. They will take them down to the point to where they'll just die. And they like to climb. They'll get up on top of stuff. I've seen them, just before I took this picture, she was actually standing on that other goat. So they'll get up as high as they can. They love to eat up high, which is something to take into consideration when you're putting them on pasture, because the death knell for a goat is a parasite, and they're going to get parasites when they're eating too close to the ground. So if you can get them to eat pasture that's up higher, or vines, trees, whatever you want taken care of, a goat will definitely take care of that for you. Having them around trees that you like and enjoy is probably not the best idea ever. Bigger trees, it's not too bad, but things like fruit trees, they'll take them down. So this is supposed to be a video. I don't know if it'll play. Will it play? Hit what? Go next. That's supposed to be a video too. Do I have a mouse I can click on it? No. I don't know what to do. I don't think so. I don't see one. If I stick my hand way in there, will it bite me? Okay. This is, now when I rotate them, oh, you had the magic, that was awesome. Oh, I'm not smart enough to use that. Okay. So this is just kind of a broad overview pan of, now this was full of briars, full of rose bushes, and it was completely green. You could not see through it at all. And this is what they did in, I had like 4 goats up there for just a few weeks. And they are a cleaning crew. So if you have like fence rows that, you just can't get to, they're excellent for that. The only issue with the fence rows is that if you have goats that are horned, which we do because I find their horns to be excellent handles when you're trying to do things with them, they will get their heads. I've got a picture here in a minute. That's my electric fence that I put through there. So all the old farmers in my area that had goats back in the day, they will tell you that a fence that will hold water will hold a goat. And maybe not always, right? Fatima's goats jump over top of the fences. We've had a few of them do that as well. So, they stick their heads through fences, which is kind of not good sometimes. But I found the electric netting to be the most effective. If you can keep your shock value pretty high on that, it does tend to help. Oh, it doesn't want to work for me. So this is, I had just let them out in this pasture. I have a place where I put them to get them in one spot and kind of secure, and then I'll move the fence, and then I'll open that back up. And you can see this was the very first thing in the field that they went to, which is a ginormous rose bush. If you have pasture, you know that rose bushes are something that you just don't want out there. They're an extremely invasive species brought to us by the English. And they will take over an entire pasture. These guys love them. They will eat that rose bush down until it's almost nothing, and they'll even take the briars off of it. They just strip them. I don't know how they manage to eat them, but you can just go in and just clip them off. And which of course they grow back because they're rose bushes, but they will continue to eat all of that green off of those rose bushes, and eventually you won't have any. So the benefit of having them pastured, in rotation with the cows is cows are gonna go in, they're gonna eat all of the things that the goats don't like. They're gonna want that grass. These goats are gonna eat everything else that you don't want in that pasture. Their manure gets really distributed equally across your fields too, which is something that you don't get with cows. With cows, you have to drag the manure to get it spread if you want it to spread. Goats, they distribute it equally, and their manure, it disintegrates a lot more quickly. There's a lot more access to nutrients for the ground with their manure as well. Now, these guys, this is a very sensitive mouse. So this is another pasture that I've had them on before. Of course, where we're at, there's lots of rocks. And that's a very nice thing to have in your pasture with your goats. If you don't have a way for the goats to wear their hooves down effectively, you will have to trim them. Which is kind of a job. So, having a pasture that you can just let them do their own natural thing on is very beneficial, like Fatima was talking about. Having them out in their natural environment is a much better deal. Now, the breeds that I use, I mixed in a lot of different breeds. So these guys, you can see there's Alpine, there's Saanen, there's Boer. We mixed in a little bit of La Mancha as well. And I just recently had, I had went to one of our local farms has a petting zoo, and I was thinking about Fawn when I was thinking about talking about this. I had an emotional purchase. I bought a pygmy goat from the petting zoo. She's so cute and she's so friendly. I mean, she comes up and rubs on you like a dog, you know, and I'm like, oh my gosh, well, I don't know why I bought her. But now we have pygmy goats as well, so maybe we can do a little trading bond. So, yeah, these goats, I try to breed them for disease resistance. That's my main concern, and for size for our market. So if you mix the milk breeds and the meat breeds, you end up with a good sized goat that is gonna also produce milk. Now they won't produce as much milk as a pure milk stock, but you can see this one right here, that's Fairy. Her bag is rather large. She before I cycled her out, I sold her because she was getting a little bit older. Typically about 9 or 10 years is gonna be your max for like good breeding for your goats. It's kind of like cows, they're a little bit longer, but you know, you don't wanna go much past 10 years on them before it becomes a little bit risky at the cost factor, basically. So these guys, you know, we're in a mountainous area. We have, because we live on a farm that's shaped like a bowl, we have a lot of water runoff, and because it was previously heavily logged and lots of tobacco grown on it, we have erosion issues, and so water is a problem. Now, the goat that you saw that had the brown head and the white body, she's a Boer. Boers were brought here to Kentucky in the 1990s from South Africa, and a lot of people got really excited about Boer goats, but they're from a very dry area. So like having goats that are, you know, naturally acclimated to the dry and bringing them to the wet, I mean, and you know, this is, when that happened in our area, from what a lot of people have told me, like it used to be everybody out there had goats, and then these Boer goats come in and everybody gets excited because they're like, I can grow a big goat and sell it for more at the market, and then next thing you know, people are like, you can't keep a goat alive. And so I started to think about it, and you know, we had some terrible issues. I had several Boer goats that I had purchased and brought them in, and they had babies. And one year, it was the year that like was almost the kicker. We were gonna like never buy another goat again. We were done. We're selling them all. We lost 11 goats that year, like within a month's time. And I was just like, you know, I mean, that's, every farmer has that point where they tank at something, you know, and it's just you know, you're gonna either do it and you're gonna do it right after that, or you're never gonna do it again. And so we decided to continue, and our practices are all a lot different now. So I mix in, you know, the Alpines, the Saanens. Those goats are all from regions of the world that have a lot more water than South Africa does. And so they're much more hardy now. I've had a lot better luck with them, and it's still been able to maintain all of the good qualities that I like in them. So your infrastructure. That goat right there is the reason why I do electric fence now. It's so aggravating. You know, I mean, I work a regular job, and so it's always, you know, just this kind of every morning when you have a fence like that and you know that that can happen, you know, I mean, if you talk to people who goat farm and they have page wire fence, there's always that risk of you're gonna come home to a dead goat that's hanging out the fence. So, you know, I mean, we decided to go with the electric, and it's very movable too, which is nice because I can force them to be grazing in the space that I want them to. I don't want them grazing down too low, because that's how they're gonna get infected with parasites. And so that's been for us a better option. For some people, you know, I mean, I know several goat farmers now that they disbud, which there's nothing wrong with that. I found myself unable to do it because I'm a wimp. You have to, of course, Emily's going to talk about that some probably, but I mean, you have to do it when they're little babies. They're so tiny and cute, and you like burn their skull, and I'm like, oh gosh, you know, which is, there's nothing wrong with it, but I just, yeah, we struggled over that decision, you know, and with castration, like Vaughn was talking about, we went back and forth about whether we should band or whether we should cut. You know, of course, cutting it's fast. It's probably in the long haul, it's less painful for the goat. But we typically do band our goats because a lot of times I'm the one who's doing it. And so, you know, again, I'm a little hesitant. So we do cut when we take care of the cattle, but you know, that's a personal decision. How much can you handle, right? I mean, what are you willing to do? And you know, I mean, there's nothing wrong with all those different ways of doing things. This is one of our goat shelters. Now, we don't always have shelter in the pasture that they're in the summer months and in the warm times. We just make sure they have areas that have like a lot of good tree growth. And I've even had them kid out in the woods, and they did fine. Actually, I think they sometimes do better that way. But, you know, when it gets really cold, of course, you want them inside, you know, a barn stall. You hear stories all the time about people, you know, bringing, like, their animals inside, like in your home. We did do that once. We don't have any animals in the house because I bake bread for the market. But one time we had this little tiny goat that ended up motherless. It was a friend of mine. She's like, please take this goat. I'm like, I want that goat. We put the goat in the house. It was February, you know? And I'm like, we put it in a little cage, and, you know, then it's looking, you know, kind of sad because it doesn't have any room to walk around, and I feel guilty, right? So I'm like, well, we have to let this goat out. I guess we're having a goat walking around in the house. That's what we're doing. Well, the little goat potty trained himself. You can believe that. He would go right back in his cage and go to the bathroom. And by the time that this goat got old enough to put outside, he was the most intolerable animal you've ever seen in your life. You would walk out there, you would bend over to get the feed, he would be on your head. Yeah, so he got sold to a petting zoo. It was one in Tennessee, though, it wasn't Vaughn's. So working your goats. It's taken quite a few years for us to figure out how to work the goats instead of the goats working us. So our goats are, you know, they're kind of big. And so, you know, especially some of the billies. And if you know, we initially had a lot of hands on deck because we've got 5 kids, and now, you know, the baby just turned 18. And so, you know, then you don't have so many people to help you out. So my co-farmer, maybe this milk stand, it's actually, and Vaughn, I love that you upcycle stuff because we do too. It's an upcycled coffee table, and he put this, you know, harness on the top of it, and it just folds up like a pair of scissors, and you can latch it, and right in front of Fairy's face is a little trough that you put some grain in. She'll let you do whatever you want to do, which is great. So that's what I use for my milking stand. That is also how I tend the goats. So I have trimming her hooves, giving her vaccinations. In the summertime, sometimes I rub them down with diatomaceous earth to kind of help them out a little bit, you know, with the flies and whatnot. But it's a very effective way if you can get them corralled. Anything you can do to make your life easier. You know, sometimes they do get a little bit wild when you're trying to catch them and stuff, and if they're horned, you know, they can hurt you. Then this is the reason why a lot of people choose to dehorn. I have a neighbor, she dehorns all of hers because one of her goats came by and clipped her in the leg real hard and, you know, hurt her pretty bad. So, you know, just making sure that your management is kind of set up ahead of time is super useful. So kidding and milking, now For the most part, the mamas are going to do what, nature demands. They're going to be okay. Your first time around kidding for a goat, typically they will only have one baby. As they get older, well, not all the time, yeah. But typically as they get older, then, some of them will be, throwing 3 babies. You want to, like Vaughn said, you want to make sure that they are, eating right away, up and moving around. It's really, really important. With our herd, I've only had a little bit of trouble out of them here and there. It is good to know a little bit of like goat birth first aid if you have to assist with a birth, knowing how to pull and when to pull. It's different. Everything, even though it's a ruminant, all of the stuff that's going on with a goat is very different than a cow, down to the milking process. I know how to milk a cow, and when we got goats to milk, I thought, that's fine. I'm in like Flint. I know what I'm doing. I go behind my goat and start squeezing, and she looks at me. She's like, you could see her saying, what the heck, So I was like, okay, so I get inside and I get on YouTube. How do you milk a goat? Yeah, their teats are really small. Even our bigger goats, their teats are pretty small. You have to pinch with your 2 fingers, and then you squeeze the rest of it. You want to get that milk trapped in there. Now, the way that their udders are set up is like most mammals. They have little milk sacs right at the top of their teat. And you have to be really careful when you feel that, because you'll feel those little milk sacs in there. If you just squeeze lightly, you don't want to squeeze those. You want to go just below them when you milk. Otherwise, you can cause her extreme pain, and you can get blood in the milk as well if you squeeze those. If you ever watched a baby goat eat, they'll get suckled on, and then they'll bang on their mom. And it looks so horrible, and it's like, oh, she's in pain. What they're doing is hitting those little tiny milk sacs and getting them to release. And so when you milk, you can simulate that. If typically, she's got you can see she's got her face in the food. She does not care what I'm doing on the other end. But, sometimes the food will run out, or she'll be like, I'm done. And you can use that technique to get the last of the milk out. Now, typically when I am milking a goat, I won't start milking until 3, sometimes 4 weeks after the mama has her baby, to make sure that that baby has maximized, its nutrition. You can start to milk before that. There's nothing wrong with that, especially if you have an older, experienced goat. But I will do what I call milk sharing with the babies. Babies don't like it. I think it's great because I'll only milk 1 time a day, which fits in with my work schedule. So typically, I will stall the babies overnight. Before I go to work in the morning, I will pull mama out. I'll milk her, and then I'll put the babies back in there with her for the day so they can spend their day together and they can eat. I usually will wait that long to start doing that because I want to make sure those babies can eat a little bit of hay on their own, eat a little bit of grain on their own, and that way they grow good. Now, very important thing to know. The reason why people think goat milk tastes bad is because a lot of people keep their billy goat around the nannies. Billy goats, their pheromones literally come up off of the body and land on the nannies. And so if you keep that billy around those nannies, your milk will taste just like that billy smells, which is not pleasant. So we separate our billies. A lot of times if he's getting ready to get cycled out, we'll sell them. But you should always, and like Fatima was saying too, and I think Vaughn said the same thing, they need to be in a herd, right? So if you separate your billy, you need to put a wether with it, which is a goat that has, been circumcised, or not circumcised, castrated, sorry. Whoa, that was way wrong. Oh goodness, that was funny. Yeah, so just making sure that your billy has somebody to hang out with, because he'll get lonely, and that can make their health go into decline. So, and what to do with the milk, right? Well, drink it. I don't want to tell you to do anything dangerous, of course, because I'm kind of I had the risk-taking gene, but, which is, probably these guys do too because we all have goats, right? So we drink it raw when we drink it. There is absolutely nothing wrong with, pasteurizing it. That's a very good practice. But, we keep pretty close tabs on our nannies that we're milking. And so for personal use for at home, we definitely do that. If I were, we're not, of course not allowed to sell it in Kentucky unless you have commercial license to do so. But if you were to say, sell it as hobby milk or sell your jar that happens to have milk in it, which a lot of people do in my area, I always recommend that people, pasteurize that just for their own safety. I also make cheese at home, which is, has been a pretty fun adventure. Lots of fails in everything that I'm talking about, right? From 11 goats dying to about 5 wheels of cheese getting thrown in the sinkhole, because for those of you who don't know, if you have a sourdough bread culture near your cheese culture, it infects your cheese with a very dangerous bacteria and it can kill you if you eat it. And I kept coming up with cheese that looked all wonky and I'm like, what is going on? It took me a lot of research to figure it out. So, all of these things, the soap, when I first started making soap, I had some of it explode like a volcano in my front room. The floor was the cleanest I think it has ever been. But it just went everywhere. I'm like, oh my gosh. But eventually, if you're either dumb enough or stubborn enough, you'll figure it out. So now at our local market, I don't sell cheese because that's illegal too, but I do sell the goat milk soap, and it's a nice little value-added profit that you can add to your farm. And that's us. We're on Facebook, Instagram. I have a friend that talked me into TikTok, so we do a little bit of that too. So, all right.
Is it where we starting questions?
Yeah, we would give about maybe 20 minutes for question and answer.
All right, gang. So we have 20 minutes for questions and answers. Is that what you just said? That's what she just said. I'm just going to repeat it. Oh. So normally whenever I'm doing Q&A for any type of thing, I try to open up with a statement, and I like to call people out, like the person laying back on the chair. I'll make it obvious that you're either going to be paying attention or you getting called on. That being said, does anybody have any questions about anything? Yes, in the orange hoodie, please. Okay, so I got it all. And this is for everybody else, especially at this table. My question is, and then go directly into your question. The backstory and the long story and all the other stuff that goes with it is really confusing to everybody. And because I do this enough, I know how to pinpoint what you're talking about. You're talking about rotational grazing. That's what you asked your question on. And then you went into this other stuff that everybody's like, the hell? You can't see, but I can see everybody else's faces. And there were faces that were kind of like. So remember, my question is, and then your question, and then we'll go. Rotational grazing.
I totally got your question. So you're wanting to know about like when you're rotating the goats and rotating the cows in, and how there's different parasites for them. And so like goats, the parasites that they get actually come from a snail, and Emily can tell you way more cool stuff about it because she's science. So, but if they graze down too low, they eat those snails, and then they get the parasites that way. Parasites for cows, mostly hanging out in their manure. So, you know, they're eating the grass down around the manure, and you know, it's a different type of parasite completely. And so those goats could eat that cow parasite, and it would never affect them. It would just go right through them. And same thing with the cows. And so you want to rotate, so that way, and rotating for any herd animal, not just goats, if you want them to stop eating when the grass is like this tall. You want them to, you know, not be grazing down too low where their manure is.
I think she covered it all.
One of the goat parasites that we deal with is homuncus, and I will talk about it. But the egg will crawl up, like it hatches, so the larval stage will crawl up a blade of grass, and it can only get so far. So we know that if they eat down further than, you know, say 4 inches on the grass, then they're susceptible to that. However, if we don't let them graze that low, but they don't have a setting on them, you know, so that's the problem. Does that help at all? Okay, sorry.
And this is why you need to have your veterinarians and your technicians and technical people with you that help extension people, because things like that I would have no clue about. Like, the parasites come up the grass to a certain length, and if your goats eat past that, then they get who's thinking about that? The veterinarians and the doctors, correct. Exactly, and the people with dead goats, for sure. Any other questions? Children first and then adults. So the question for everybody that didn't get it, whenever the goats are being banded, what do you do with the male parts that fall off after a couple weeks? Me, I throw them at the dog. That's what I do. If I don't throw them at the dog, I throw them in the trash. But most likely, my dog's gonna get it. I don't remember, I don't think I pointed this out when I showed the 3 bucks. Boy, Billy, and then Birdie was on the end. If you noticed on Birdie compared to the other 2, I'm gonna try to, well, you know what, yeah. I'll try to do this. You gotta go way back. Almost there. If you notice on Birdie, he is missing a part of his ear. Because I have a dog that decides that all things in the backyard that isn't my other dog is food. So I could throw those goat parts at him and he won't have a problem eating it. Just like he didn't have a problem biting Birdie's ear off through the fence.
I also wanted to add that if you actually find one that has fallen off, is actually believed to be good luck. So I try to find them.
That's awesome. What? You send your kids out for them?
I've been tempted, but no.
Pass all the good luck there.
Emily, are you going to go over how to band and all? Okay, so something that, like, of course, everything that we know we learned off the internet. I hope that she's as smart as she thinks she is. But when you band a goat, it's really important there's certain things you have to do. Like the male goats have little teats on them, like they're like nipples basically. You have to be really cautious not to get one of those nipples caught up in your band. And so it's a lot the same with other animals. And there are people who do eat them as well. I have not, but I know that the eyes just got big. I just want to throw that out there.
Someone had a question. I can take it too.
I would be mostly interested in land management with the goats that I'm planning to get. And I was wondering, with the electric netting that you were talking about, I would really like to include some of my forested area. How do you do that? I've been trying to figure out the logistics of that, and I can't figure that out. Thank you.
Yeah, that is difficult. I think that actually when we go out to the barn, they're going to show that electric fencing. Now that the way that our forest is, it's all, well, you've seen it, it's crazy. And so you just have to find a path, and that fence, it'll go anywhere. And as long as your box is in a spot where the sun's gonna hit it, it's gonna stay electrified. But sometimes you have to cut through a little bit of it. So most of ours, our cows have grazed through there already. And cows will make their own path because they're a really big animal. As a matter of fact, any kind of bovine will make a path. Most of the roads that were early in Kentucky were made by buffalo. So those cows, they will keep traveling that same path over and over again. And I found that that's been a really kind of an easy way to do it. But sometimes you get that fence because it's all connected. And so you're basically, you roll it up and you unroll it as you go. So sometimes getting up through those briars and stuff, you will get it caught and hung. It is nice to have another person to help you if you're doing that.
I also wanted to add a little bit to that, because we do use some electric netting in places that we don't have fencing. And especially if you're using a solar box, make sure you keep it hot, especially because some horned goats will try to, put their heads through some of the holes. So just keep in mind of that.
Listen to them. I just use panel fencing, and my goats, because I'm in the city, they don't get electrical fences unless I'm doing like a goatscaping job. But they know what the electric fence is because they've seen the dog get blasted by it, and maybe one of the nannies has seen it, and through her experience, like one time it was like, pow, and she was, oh shit, and just kind of like went the other way. Like she's never been around that fence again, and then every time they see that fence, they kind of run away from it. But I don't have that issue. I just use wooden panels, and they come to the wooden panel to eat from. Ryder, you had a question in the back? Okay.
If you have a goat that consistently goes through an electric fence, sell it.
Yeah. That was like, and to add to that, that's like the temperament thing. If you realize that you have just like a bad behaving goat, that goat can teach the other goats what to do. Get rid of that one, and the rest of them won't learn that behavior. Like Birdie jumping on the roof, he's not that type of goat. Only because Billy chased him did he jump on the roof. Like, no, seriously. Since then, he has never jumped on the roof. And I mean, like, this goat would jump on the roof, jump out the backyard, and then scream to go back inside with the rest of them. I've had neighbors call me and say, hey, man, you got a goat in the front yard. A goat's in the front yard? What do you mean? I'm at work or I'm somewhere else. I got to drive 20 minutes back home, and Birdie's sitting in the front where cars are passing by, people could be walking by, and he's sitting on the front scared because he wants to be with the herd, but he doesn't want to be out there, but he can't be around Billy. So, like, you want the ones that behave well, because, I mean, God, he could have took off, did any kind of wandering. He doesn't do that. Billy, on the other hand, in this story, I didn't mention this story, my very first time deciding that I'm going to get these Craigslist goats, very, very first time, Billy, Bella, and Bucky. Those are my first three. We go out into the middle of Indiana to buy these goats from a farm all the way by, what's the casino out there? French Lick. We're driving out by French Lick, and they're like, yeah, we'll just meet by the Dairy Queen on this road where there's like a big clearing, and great. So the guy that I'm buying them from, he tells me like, oh man, these are my young 3-1s. This one right here, he's really good temperament. He's a really good goat. These other two, they're kind of skittish. You just gotta, work with them and they'll be good. All right, cool. I get Billy and I put Billy in this dog crate and I close the crate. I go back over and I'm going to grab Bella at this time, or I grab her, I'm holding her, and I'm walking back over to my SUV. The hatch is up, the dog crate is on the inside, and Billy is standing at the door of the dog crate with the dog crate open because he pushed it open. I am maybe from here to Robin with a goat in my hand, and I try to take a step, and he screams at me, and he's like, ah! And I take another step forward to put the other one in and then close the door, but by that time, Billy's like here. And he screams again, but it's like a really like crazy scream, and I'm not gonna do it because you guys will laugh at me. But after that, he shot from this to like gone. For about 40 minutes on my very first day of owning goats, I'm chasing Billy between a highway and a field and a highway and a field. And the guy that I was buying them from, you know, he already has his money. He's like, man, I got my money. I ain't worried about this crap. Like, this is your goat now. And I'm whistling, and nah, you're not gonna whistle no goats back over. That's not, they're not dogs. And we tried to shake a can with like rocks in it to make it sound like food. I mean, it's my first day. And I'm thinking to myself, like, how the hell am I gonna do this in Louisville, and I can't even do this in, you know, BFE, Indiana, like. And he goes and he gets the mom, and then he brings the mom back like 15 minutes later, and the mom calls for Billy, and Billy's 90 yards away from me in the field, and he pops his head up in the grass, and you see this goat pop up and then start jumping towards the mom, and I snatch him up by the two front legs, and he didn't have horns at the time, and he was like, hey man, when you get to the city, you're not gonna have this mom with you, so be sure to keep your goat in an area that it can't get out. I say that story to say this about Birdie again, behavior. Billy has always had that bad behavior, where Birdie has never had that type of behavior. When you know the goat that you have and how they behave, keep the ones that you know behave good. Billy, I was glad when it was time for him to go into the blue box. Whereas like that goat he has torn a pair of pants, he has broken fences, he has done all the type of destructive things that you don't want to have a goat do on in my backyard, let alone on a farm. Where Birdie's dad, Boy, would only behave that way if Belle, the mom, was being taken away from him, or if he was being separated. He was never the type to have that type of behavior. His son's the same way. Questions? Any more questions? Ma'am. Pointers on trimming hooves.
I do trim, but not as much as I used to before. It depends on the breed that you have. Trimming can be hard if you have to bend all the time. So I would say if you have to bend all the time, try not to do 5 at a time, 5 at a time for your back safety or whatever. But again, the temperament is important. So if you're not, I guess having feed like Holly does, will help if you're trimming their goats. But with us, with commercial goats, we almost had to get the spin table thing. I know it's not cheap, but in the long run, it does pay for itself.
Yeah. Well, and 2, you see my table. Yeah, and yeah. And it's sheep, right, that you have. Yeah, sheep are not as malleable as goats are. Goats are quirky and friendly. Yeah, and goats, they've got the horns too. That's what I do, like the ones that are not trained to milk. Now, if they're trained to milk, they will jump right up on that table and they'd be like, I'm ready, you know, but if they're not, I grab them, I'll step up on the table, grab them, hoist them up, and I can sit down. The table's big enough to where I can sit down next to them and I can trim the hooves while I'm sitting down. And you're right, we used to do it, you know, where you bend down and it will kill your back, yeah.
I also wanted to add something. So if you have an area where they use a lot, like where they drink water, maybe throwing some rock there, that would help, you know, wear down those hooves.
Mine's is a little unconventional. I kind of sometimes put like roofing shingles out on things that they like to climb on, and they climb on it and it kind of wears their stuff down, their hooves down. And then in the wintertime, I pull all that stuff back, and I know this is probably not what I should do, but in the wintertime, I don't worry about trimming their hooves because in my backyard it gets really wet and muddy. And I just think, like, if I have to trim their hooves, that makes it easier for bacteria to get caught and get closer to, you know, their inner workings. So I wait until like right around March, April, and then that's when I go through and I'll snip everything. But between December till April, it's like I don't even touch their feet. I try not to. And I don't even want anything to like break skin out there because it's too soggy, it's too nasty. And yeah, hopefully the overgrowth is something that helps protect their feet until April. Ryder.
You're in an urban setting. The other two farmers here are in a more rural setting. As far as, you probably don't have snails crawling up blades of grass in your goat yard. What sort of parasite load or health issues do you run into with urban goats?
My biggest thing I would assume is pneumonia, and them being able to breathe properly, and especially with the rain and humidity or the moisture in the air. Correct? Sort of, yeah, maybe, kind of. Yeah, and yeah, we haven't done a fecal sample yet, but whenever I do my like little Famancha eye pull, they look pretty red, so that's pretty good. Whenever it's not that, it's when you're in trouble. So I don't really look at or think that I have that much of a parasite problem because they don't really consume blades of grass and things of the sort. Mines are more other infections. So like if they'll scratch their eyes with their hooves and then end up with like a pink eye or something. The second I have a situation of any type of cloudiness on an eye or pink eye or something like that, I immediately go into like panic quarantine and like there's this blue bottle that you get from Rural King or Tractor Supply where you spray their eyes with this thing and it like helps clean that stuff up. The name, can't even remember it, but I know it's in the blue bottle and that's the one that you use. I've had the pink eye situation happen, and I mean in a matter of like days, it went from one blind goat to about like 6. And 6 blind goats, when like their eyes get all cloudy and they can't see, I promise it's like one of the scariest things out there. They all look like zombies. They don't want to move because they can't see anything, and they're all scared so they don't make noise, but they stand there with these white clouds over their eyeballs. So like they're just standing there waiting for you to shake food, and then they'll turn towards the sound real slow. I mean, it's crazy. And then as soon as you spray them and they feel like the little mist hit their eyes, they like do this and they're like, but they don't run because they can't. I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I could see myself doing this with the goat turning around. And I should have used a picture to show that, but I have pictures of that craziness. But yeah, that's the stuff I run into. I don't run into parasites. One more question. You with the straw? Yeah, I was too. Like I told everybody in the beginning, I called people out. You were just one that called out. depends on how much protein they're eating. So if they don't get a lot of protein, their hooves don't grow as fast. When I started feeding mine spent grain, their hooves, horns, and all that stuff start shooting like crazy. So I tried to stop feeding grain. But a time on how often to trim hooves, when it grows crazy and you see them walking funny. But other than that, I'm not just checking their feet like every month. They're like, yeah, man, hooves look too big. Like, I don't do that. But I did notice it when I started feeding sprint grain. You guys?
Yeah, with my mamas, it's really beneficial to their milk production to give a little bit of grain, and I always have to trim their hooves more often. And usually once a month or so, we'll do like a health check on them. We go out there and we look at their gums, you look at their eyelids, and that's to look for parasite overload. We look at their hooves, and just generally just feel all over them. They love it, because they think they're getting petted, but really you're checking them out. Looking for lumps, looking for anything that's out of the ordinary on them, but that's typically when I'll check their hooves.
For us, now we rarely trim hooves just because they have enough room to roam around with rotational grazing. However, sometimes they get bacterial infection and you might have some hoof issues. I think I was at a workshop with Emily one time where you had advised to move them out of where the infection is, and that seems to do the trick. So thank you. I think there's one more. It all depends on the size of the area and how much grass or the type of grass that you have in that area.
Yeah, it's the same. When mine eat up in a lot of areas, and if once they have, you've seen where they stripped it, once that's gone and they start to eat down, then I'm looking for a new place to have them hang out.
Good afternoon. I'm Emily Clement. I've met a lot of you all before doing different goat things. So I'm really kind of excited to be here today, and thank you, Oak, for asking me to come. I'm now a Jefferson County public school teacher, and so I got to bring some of my students with me today, which made me super happy. I worked out here at Kentucky State University for 6 years under Dr. Ken Andrews, and he was a small ruminant specialist. And so I was his research associate, so I got to learn all things really goat parasites. That's what we mainly did. But anyway, by trade, I'm a licensed veterinary technician. I've been a licensed technician since '98. So I've done a lot of different things with that, working in emergency hospitals and regular clinics and all of that kind of stuff. And then I started teaching veterinary technology. And after teaching veterinary technology on the college level, I was asked to come start a program here at Kentucky State University to do the same thing. That program never went through, but luckily their small ruminant specialist was like, hey, do you want to be my buddy? Do you want to work for me? So I did that, and it wasn't until this job at the Jefferson County Public School came open to teach veterinary assisting. That I left here. So it's been quite a thing. And I just realized that those are cows up here on my PowerPoint instead of goats. I was like, I need a cover thing, and I just found some pictures. And I was like, that's really cute. Yeah, those are cows. But all things happen for a reason, right? So the whole reason I got into goats was because when I went to school, I went to, I didn't come here. I went to Murray State University, and I was able to milk cows. And I fell in love with dairy cows, like absolutely in love with them, because I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. I didn't know. I used to make fun of people that, milk cows. So I absolutely fell in love with that. And when I came back here and I graduated, or came back to Louisville and graduated, I went into pet cow. You can't really have that in the middle of the city, but you can have a goat. And so my first goat, her name was Cece for city cow. So now, see, it all ties together beautifully. Those cows were meant to be there. Okay. Today, it's been really nice to hear the other presentations, and I can fill in on some things. I am by no means a goat expert. By no means. I just have some experience doing it, and especially the parasite part of it. But what I put together was just a brief overview so you would know what you were getting into if this is what you think you might want to do. Because I think that a lot of us who are in goats right now wish somebody would have said something to us. Do you know what I mean? Like, I had no idea. And it's all dealable. You can deal with it. It's not that you can't. It's when you're faced with it as a surprise. And that surprise is usually pretty expensive. Okay, all right, here we go. So the wonderful world of goats. Oh, I forgot this thing pops up now. So it's been nice to hear that everybody has said, what is your purpose for your animal? And you have to know the purpose that you have your animal for. If you have it as a yard ornament, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a very expensive yard ornament. Very expensive yard ornament. However, if you are wanting to produce meat, you need to feed for the meat. You also need to breed for the meat. You also need to breed for longevity or being able to withstand. So parasite resistance, parasite resilience, those are really big things to breed for. That's why buying things off Craigslist is not a good idea. Even buying things at the sale barn is not a good idea, because if it's somebody else's junk, guess what you got? There's been quite a few, unfortunately, farms that I have visited where they've actually ruined their entire herd just by bringing in 4 goats that they got at the sale barn. Or, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. So you need to know what you're getting into. Like, what do I want this for? Do I want meat? Do I want dairy? Do I want fiber? Which, is anybody thinking about doing fiber with goats? Yeah, I need a mohair hookup right now. I'm like one skein short of the rest of my Afghan, but anyway, this is personal. Okay, know your production needs, so feed and treat accordingly. What is the reproductive status? So you always have to know what reproductive status your herd is in. So if you have intact males, guess who they don't need to be running with? Your intact females, right? So intact, I just mean they haven't been castrated. I have heard before, and it's interesting that, like, you mean he would breed with his mother? And his sister and his grandma? Yeah, and his little baby sister. Yes, so you have to be smarter than your goat is something, one of my favorite sayings is you have to be smarter than your dog, but you have to be smarter than your goat. Like, you are in control of those things. Like, these are the situations we can control, but you have to be prepared to control them. You have to have separate places for males and females. You have to know what time you need to separate them. Like, at what age are they at sexual maturity? When do I need to worry about that? Then you also, okay, hold on. I'm probably getting way ahead of myself. Okay, yeah. So just starting out with a healthy foundation and just being here, sitting here, is a really good start. Just knowing what you don't know, or trying to find out what you can do to get off to a good start is great. So your animal source, it's been nice that you have talked about animal source. Like, you can't just, oh, yes, you can. You can willy-nilly just get an animal wherever you want, but you will pay the price for that. Like, genetics matter, and the way that an animal has been raised matters. So Vaughn talked a little bit about behavior. We've talked about behavior. We had, when up here, at our herd up here, if they got 2 times to get their head stuck in a fence, and then they were off to freezer camp. So, and that's because that takes your time, and your time costs money, you know, and or they've been sitting there all day, and then you've got to nurse that back to health, and that is money, right? And time is money, and that's also just really bad behavior, and they're going to repeat it. So just ixnay that one. We also would, what do you call that? We'd put a big broomstick on. Have you seen that before? We put, yeah, yeah, we would do the broomsticks on their horns so they couldn't get it stuck anymore. Okay. Need to make sure that they can have a shelter. Or was it you that had the run-ins? Did you have a run-in? Is that what I saw? Yeah, okay. And so that is good shelter, you know, from whatever. It cannot be tight with goats because goats urinate and defecate where they sleep or where they're hanging out. And that ammonia that builds up from the bottom is going to cause them all kinds of respiratory diseases. So it's going to irritate their lungs. They're going to be more susceptible to pneumonia and also more susceptible to like lungworms and things like that that they might have been able to fight off before, but now they're in a weakened state. Does that make sense? So it's great, you know, if it's cold and it's windy, all that kind of stuff. Your main thing with goats is you've got to keep them out of cold, wet. Like they do not need to be in cold, wet wind. So if you can keep the cold, wet wind off of them, you're doing fine. Is that your experience? Okay. The nutrition, so their dietary needs, you've got to be able to provide for that. So you've got to realize that in Kentucky, sometimes it's 60 degrees in January, and you might have grass out there that they can eat. But there's about 4 to 5 months a year that you're going to have to provide, have either stockpiled some food for them, some hay for them, or a field for them with nutritional food, or you're going to have to supply it somehow. Does that make sense? Okay. And you always need to adjust their feed based on their age, their breed, and their reproductive stage. So if they are getting ready to breed, we feed them a certain nutritional combination. If they are currently pregnant, we feed them at a different nutritional level. And if they are drying off, so if they have had babies and we're trying to dry up their milk, we feed them a different nutritional combination. Does that make sense? You have to know that or you're going to get into some trouble, especially when people are socking food to their pregnant does. When people just keep piling food in their pregnant does, you end up with something called pregnancy toxemia, which you end up, you spend all this money pumping your goats full of food, and probably neither them or their baby will make it if you didn't catch it in time. Okay. Fresh water, so you all mentioned that. That's super duper important. The best part of fresh water in a field is that in the middle of the winter, if you don't have heated waters or a source like your husband built, which is amazing, is you've got to go break it up several times a day. Like, one time a day to me just isn't enough, you know, when it's 2 degrees outside. So you try going that long without water. Okay. So I thought prevention is absolutely the best thing you can do. And if you know the preventative measures that you need to take, you can think, okay, can I do that? And if that's something that you can't do, then it's probably not for you. But we need to do vaccinations. Their vaccine schedule, they require less vaccinations than your dog and cat do. I mean, it's not bad. Theirs are for clostridial diseases. Of those is something that causes an enterotoxemia, or causes, it's called overeating disease, and that's the kids are especially susceptible to that. So we need to vaccinate at 6 weeks old, 10 weeks old, and then annually after that. You're annually, if you are breeding, which we can talk about breeding in a minute, but I don't have a whole lot of that for you. But you want to give the mother, are we here? Yeah. You want to give her the immunity to pass on in her milk. So you're going to vaccinate her 30 days before she's ready to kid. How do I know 30 days before she's gonna kid? You planned her breeding. Okay. There we go. Let's see. So CD&T is the one that every single goat in your herd is gonna get. And then there are optional ones. Here on this farm, we actually made an autogenous CL vaccine, which that's a mess. But if you're ever going to do that, just let me know and I'll show you the hookup. But there's pneumonia. So pneumonia, I was walking through the fields today and I heard a few that are they're coughy and they've got some snot going. And we've had the Mannheim hemolytica issue here before. So we do, or I always say we, this is like one of my favorite jobs I've ever had. I got to play with goats all day. But we would vaccinate for pneumonia once a year, and we would do that in the fall, getting ready to go into this season. But pneumonia is one. Rabies, some people vaccinate for rabies. And then the CL, which is the caseous lymphadenitis. And caseous lymphadenitis is something that is a bacteria that affects the lymph nodes that is contagious. It's actually highly contagious. Once you get it on your farm, it's on your farm. It gets on your stuff, because their lymph nodes, they just abscess. And then they drain, and then the stuff that they drain gets on your handling equipment, and then the next animal walks through and gets it on them, and la, 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 la. That's how that goes. So we have tried to work it out of this herd, and I don't know what the latest results are, but when I left 2 years ago, we were getting down. It was going down. But so that's CL. The word autogenous just means that to make a vaccine out of that, you take the bacteria that your farm has. So I actually just aspirated, I sucked the pus out of one of the lesions and I sent it off to the lab to have the vaccine made against that exact one. Does that make sense? That's what autogenous means. Okay. Foot rot. So you can have contagious foot rot, like you can have bacterial foot rot, and you can have one that just completely infects your soil. And like Fatima said, if it's in your soil, it's in your soil. However, foot rot, you can also have just from feet that aren't made well. That's another thing that you could look for when you're breeding something is, do they have bad feet? Don't keep breeding bad feet, I mean, that's like, if you have elf shoes on, we're going to stop right here. So, okay, because you're going to keep treating those. But so bad shoes, and I'm going to talk about hoof trimming. But bad shoes or bad feet lead to all kinds of problems, and foot rot is one of them. So, and also this type of weather right now, it's going to be nasty. I mean, anybody who has goats right now, you're going to be dealing with some foot rot pretty soon, So, or at least foot scald. So. There's also chlamydia and toxoplasmosis. These are things that can be vaccinated for. Work with your veterinarian to figure out what is applicable to your herd specifically, because you don't need to over-vaccinate. Okay. Strategic deworming. So there used to be a thing, even when I first started in this field, that when you had livestock, you rotate your dewormers. And that's probably one of the worst things that has happened to us in this field is because we rotated our dewormers 4 times a year. Like we would deworm with one chemical, and then the next time we dewormed, it would be a different chemical. And then the next time we dewormed, we'd either go back to that first one or there's a third one involved. Doing that, we've caused we've caused resistance to the parasiticides that we had. Just like we're causing the same problems by not completing our antibiotics and all this fun stuff. We have done that in especially small ruminant world. A lot of times the dewormers that we use aren't the most effective dewormer. And another fun part of that is that people don't weigh their animals. And so if you don't weigh your animal, you're either overdosing it or underdosing it. Either way, you're wasting money. Does that make sense? And then if you're underdosing it, then you're actually causing more harm than good. So strategic deworming is where we have gone now. The research is showing that 20% of your goats have 80% of your parasites. And so the parasites are shed through their feces. So there's 2 parasites mainly that we worry about. The biggest one, the one that costs the most, is Homunculus contortus, or the barber pole worm. And that is the one that I was talking about. The egg hatches, the larval stage crawls up the grass, it's eaten and then ingested again, blah, blah, that's that life cycle. The other one that they were talking about coming from a snail, so that's a meningeal worm. And so meningeal worms can cause all kinds of problems. And then we can also have a lungworm with that. But again, it's knowing what you have and what you treat it for. There's not a dewormer that's going to treat both of those at the same time. Like you can't, just because it's a dewormer doesn't mean that it's going to take care of everything. Does that make sense? Okay. So you definitely have to know what you're trying to treat, I guess, is what that is. So targeted deworming, only treating the goats that actually need to be dewormed instead of just blanket deworming, saying, it's time for you to be dewormed. But I'm going to show you tools today on how to tell to do that. It will save you a lot of money, and it's also much better for the goats and much better for our anthelmetics, or our dewormers that are out there. Okay, trying to read sideways doesn't work. Okay, let's go here. Did it all show up? Oh, good, good. So this is the parasite cycle of Homunculus contortus. And have you all seen this picture? If you're into goats, you've probably seen this picture before. But this is the development. It is very hard for me. Okay. So if you see like the little stripes on the worm up there, that's why it's called the barber pole worm, because it's a white worm and those stripes are red because it's blood that they get off of the intestines of your babies. But anyway, so the adult worms attach in the abomasum. So the abomasum is like their true stomach. It's more like our stomach, right? So it attaches in there. It eats. So if it's sucking blood, that blood has protein. That blood carries your nutrients, carries oxygen, iron, all of that kind of stuff, then that's not going into the meat or the hair or the milk that you need, right? So that's actually taking your money too. So when that's where it starts causing the problem. And then those worms that are in there lay eggs. Those eggs go through another shed, then they come out in the feces. The feces break open with dew. They break open with dew and with rain. And with the dew in the morning, those eggs will hatch, and that's when the larval stage will crawl up the grass, and that's when they become infective again. Yes? Do what? It just depends on, she asked what is the side effect of the goats ingesting worms, and so it just depends on what worm it is. So each worm attacks something differently. This particular worm, the Homunculus contortus, the problem is anemia. And so anemia is the lack of hemoglobin in your blood, or the lack of good red blood cells that you have. And so if you don't have good red blood cells, you're not feeding your body, right? You know. Okay, so that's why so one of the important things of this is not only having a good like deworming strategic deworming protocol, but this is where you do your grazing. This is where you can rotate your grazing to where they're no longer standing on, or they're no longer eating from infected areas. So if it takes 3 to 4 days for one of these things to become infective, if you rotate your areas every 3 to 4 days, you're good, right? I mean, they're gonna have some, but that's definitely a way that you can control it. Whoops, that arrow ended up in a weird spot. So the Homunculus contortus is the worm that we were talking about, and it causes anemia. The signs and symptoms for that, which is what SS is reduced productivity and even death. The FAMACHA, so, oh, good, thank you. Let me go, I'm sorry. Gosh, see, this is my problem. The FAMACHA is a tool that we're going to use to be able to see what their level of anemia is. And we're going to look at the inside of their eyelid to tell how pale or not pale that they are. And that's just going to give us a basis. That's not like true data. That's not like a hematocrit number. It's not an actual blood number, but it's just a way that we can quickly look to see what their level of anemia is, and based on that, we can either deworm them or not deworm them. I'll show you all that today. This is the FAMACHA. We look at the conjunctiva of the eye. Those are the levels. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 5 is pretty much dead. I don't think I've ever seen anything come back from 5. But anyway, so we want to see like 1 to 2. 3, we're going to start wondering what else is going on. 4, we're going to treat. 5, you would treat. 3, sometimes I treat, just depending upon what their body condition score is and if they have anything else going on. So say they have diarrhea or something like that. I'll hurry. So that's a go. I would call her a 4. We're not in the right area to see that. You need to be in daylight, like bright daylight, to see that. But that's my finger, and I remember her being a 4. So. Okay, so along with FAMACHA, you use your body condition score. Body condition score is going to tell us how much fat reserve they have, so how much they can handle, like what kind of body condition are they in, what their inside health is like, kind of, sort of. It is also numbered 1 through 5, however, they're backwards. So 5 for a body condition score is incredibly obese. And 1 is super skinny. So it's really interesting when you're doing body condition and FAMACHA scoring that you're constantly like going backwards in your brain. Do you all find that? You're going backwards in your brain going, wait, she was a 1 on body condition. But so probably if she was a 1 on body condition, she might be a 5 in FAMACHA. But okay. We are looking at, what you're looking at there is lumbar vertebrae. So right here, those are there's the spinous process that stands up straight, and then there's the transverse processes that go across. You want that muscle to go from the spinous process to the transverse process. You want it to be there. You want to feel it. You don't want it to be curved over, if that makes any sense at all. But we're going to put hands on goats so y'all can feel it. Okay, there's all that fun stuff. Body condition score. I'll caution just looking at something and giving it a body condition score. These, they all have different fur lengths. So sometimes if you're just looking at your animals out in the field, you can be like, oh, they're perfectly healthy. You should try putting your hand on it, and then your hand sinks all the way down to the bone. You know, it's very different. So always put your hands on your animals. Monitoring their health through body condition, you can track their changes. I like to work animals when we used to run 230 goats. I like to work them every month. But it was a meat production. But I would be able to see trends in what was going on with them and their body condition and in their FOMACHA and in their weight. You can track changes and you can adjust their feed accordingly. And if you need to separate them out of the herd that they're running in and need to put them somewhere else to build their body condition back up, that's completely normal. Yeah. I have common ailments on here. We're not there. So what are we at? Are we done? Okay. I just wanted to show you something like, oh, they're so cute. That is one of the biggest disease spreaders right there. So when it comes to kids, they're very susceptible to coccidia. Coccidia can kill them, but it can also completely stunt their growth. Like they're not going to develop correctly because they aren't getting the nutrition at the very, very early age. They love feeders. So this is just a hay feeder, but they love to lay in it and do all the things in it, go to the bathroom in it, all that kind of stuff. And then they're eating out of it again, so makes sense. So coccidia is going to come from their moms. So their moms are carriers of coccidia. Their moms are no longer susceptible to it. Their moms have a kind of an immunity to it, but these guys do not. And so their moms are pooping it out, just pooping it out, and they're running around and they're eating stuff off the ground, and that's how they get it. Make sense? Okay. Coccidia. So you have to have like a cleanup plan ready. Coccidia. Hoof trimming. We'll talk about that real fast. Overgrowth. So anytime you mess with the tires on a machine, there's a problem. So if they're not walking, we ready? Okay. If they're not walking, they're not eating. If they're not eating, they're not producing what you need them to produce. Does that make sense? Let me show you hoof anatomy real quick. Over here is what it's supposed to look like. I don't have a goat that looks like that. Never seen a goat that looks like that. I mean, those are like, oh, nice and fluffy. But if you'll notice those lines, what I want to show you is those lines underneath the coronary band. That is the angle that we're going to cut the foot at. What I see is a lot of times people trim hooves at the wrong angle, which causes body problems. They can't walk right. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm sorry, that was really, really, really fast. Do y'all have any questions? And we'll transition up to the barn after that. Yes? How is it contagious, or what is it? It can be. So hoof rot is kind of like this general term for this thrush, kind of this fungusy stuff that they get. But yeah, it can be in the ground, so it won't be contagious to you. Does that make? It's not zoonotic. Uh-huh.
You said like if it's in the ground, like if it's in your soil, it's in your soil. Is there like a way to like get rid of that?
I think it depends on which one it is. You can cut it down. You can till up the soil, and then you can also do like radiation is great. Sunshine is really great, but it can't be touched for a certain period of time, and I don't know that period of time. That's perfect. Is that good? Do I need any?
So let's go to the barn. So next step is out the barn. Thank you. Let's go to the barn, right?
Yeah, we'll go to the barn. So hopefully McKinley's up there. So he's going to show us, well, I'll show some stuff too. Do what? Oh, okay. I just want you to be able to put hands on these animals to know exactly what I'm talking about, like doing the FOMACHA. I can't I'm not certified to train you in FAMACHA. You can get that through like the Kentucky Sheep and Goat Development Office. There's some other place. Anyway, but I want you to see that, to see what I'm talking about, and actually feel a couple of different body conditions. I know that we do have the most obese goat up there, so that's really good to know. You have to know what's normal and what's abnormal, you know, so have that, and then McKinley will show us some hoof trimming. And because we have a huge herd here, he does it with an angle grinder. That is, to me, the most efficient method. However, it also requires you having what's called a spin doctor table, where you can restrain that goat by flipping it over on its side. That's a little costly, so understand how that doesn't always happen. But we'll do it manually too, so you can see that. Okay, cool. The barn, do you all know where the barn is? Cool. Okay, cool. Oh, yeah. It's kind of hard to hear in the barn if it's raining, but we'll make it. The barn is always nasty after it's been raining. It doesn't drain well. There isn't any standing water in the barn, but you will cross mud. Yeah.